The moment she placed her manicured hand on his forearm and tilted her head just so, like she'd practiced that exact motion 100 times in the mirror, I knew. I didn't know all the details yet, but I knew the flavor. The smirk, the rehearsed confidence, the brittle laugh that followed when she said it, loud enough for the whole table to freeze. I finally traded up. She didn't even look at me when she said it. Her eyes stayed locked on her boss, this smug real estate vampire with gelled hair, loafers without socks, and a Rolex that screamed, "I lease my ego monthly." Our friends, mutual, for years, stared like they were waiting for a punchline. A few gave the tight, nervous chuckles people give when someone tells a joke they're not sure they're supposed to laugh at. One couple actually looked down into their drinks like that'd make them invisible. I caught Dean's eye. He's known me since college, and he gave the slightest wince. That was all. No rescue. I didn't say a word. Not one. I just pushed my chair back, slow and even, like I was standing up from a funeral. Buttoned my blazer. Straightened my cuffs. The kind of small, precise movements that scream louder than any outburst. Her voice followed me as I walked. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic," she said with a half laugh, brushing it off like a speck of lint. "It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." That line, that stupid line, that was the kindling. She thought she was starring in some rom-com plot twist where the ambitious woman finds her real match and the boring old husband wanders off to quietly dissolve. But she forgot something. Something she never bothered to ask about. I wasn't the sideshow. I wasn't the safe, comfortable plan A. I was the architect of every brick she ever stood on. And she just spat on the floor. Outside, it was cold. I didn't feel it. No cab. No Uber. I didn't even look at my phone. I walked down to the parking lot and unlocked my car. Not the flashy black SUV she always demanded we drive when meeting her people. Just my old silver sedan. The one she called a dent with a steering wheel. Inside the glove box, under the registration and the crumpled receipts, was the key to something she never asked about. The folder. And while I sat there for a moment, watching my breath frost the windshield, I allowed myself 1 second. 1 second of that guttural, hollow anger that lives between your ribs. Not the type that screams. The kind that sharpens. That freezes over. If you're still listening to this and not subscribed, you're one of the 90% who hasn't clicked that button. But these stories take weeks to build, so your support honestly motivates us to keep going. A quick sub helps more than you know. Anyway, back to that parking lot. I started the engine. Not to leave. Just to warm the cabin. Then I pulled out my phone. Not to call her. Not even to text. No, I opened my private archive. It wasn't some revenge fantasy folder. It was just facts. The boring kind most people never look twice at. A list of assets. Trust structures. Equity positions. IP filings. And one folder labeled CDG Joint Ventures 2018. That dinner party? That wasn't humiliation. It was the trigger. What she didn't know, what no one at that damn table knew, was that Carradine Development Group wasn't just a fancy name on a commercial property banner. It was the holding entity I managed in silent trust. Silent, because that's how legacy families play the long game. And last month, her firm signed a strategic partnership with CDG. Celebrated it. Posted a champagne pic. Called it the start of something bold. I smiled then. Not happy. Just steady. They all thought I walked out of that party like a wounded animal. I didn't. I walked out like a locksmith. Because I already had the keys. And tomorrow, the doors were going to start locking behind her. The folder had dust on it. Not because it was forgotten, but because it was settled. Everything inside had been designed to never draw attention, never glow in a spreadsheet, never scream for credit. Just names. Signatures. Holding patterns. Clauses buried in parent companies 3 layers deep. The label on the front read, in simple black serif, Westmore Legacy Trust, established 1943. She had seen it once. Maybe twice. Scoffed. That old thing your grandfather set up? You should just cash it out or shut it down. You can't even touch the principal, right? Right. That was the point. The office was dim, lit only by the green glass desk lamp she'd begged him to get rid of years ago. It makes this place feel like a haunted bank. She preferred Scandinavian white and soft Instagram-ready filters. But he kept it because it was his grandfather's. And because some rooms are supposed to feel a little haunted. He laid the folder flat on the desk and opened it to the bookmark page. A single line, circled in red ink from years ago. Carradine Holdings, managing interest, silent appointment approved by trustee vote, retroactive filing, 2015. She never once asked what Carradine was. Never wondered why the name showed up in the small print at the bottom of her startup's first major lease agreement. She thought it was just some property group, one of the dozens that cycle through co-working investments and city development grants. She didn't realize it was the only group with controlling rights on the tech campus her firm had just moved into. She'd hosted a launch party 2 weeks earlier, standing in front of branded banners, holding a flute of Prosecco, and smiling like she'd won something. She posted a reel on Instagram with the caption, "From garage to global globe showing Europe Africa laptop computer briefcase, so proud of what we've built." He watched it twice, not because it hurt, but because it was fascinating to see someone celebrating while standing on a trapdoor they couldn't even see. Buried in the funding agreement, which she never read past page 6, was a clause mandating mandatory ethics review of any undisclosed personal relationships affecting leased development zones. Her trade-up dinner stunt? That counted, especially since the property was under the Carradine umbrella and managed quietly by the Westmore Trust. He took out his pen, signed one name, just one, and slid the document into the outgoing box on the far side of the desk. Not out of vengeance, not out of malice, just process. Let the auditors do their job. Let the disclosures start unraveling. He wouldn't have to say a word. Her public performance had already done the heavy lifting. He leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes unfocused. It's funny what people choose to remember. When they were dating, she always asked about his job, not his family. "I want a man who builds himself," she said once. "Not one who coasts on daddy's money." He agreed with that, actually, which is why he never told her. She thought Westmore was just a polite-sounding last name. She never connected it to the family that held 3 seats on the Regional Planning Commission, or to the silent fund that seeded 3 of the last 6 real estate tech unicorns in the state, or to the clause that allowed him to pull a lease without board consensus if romantic entanglements threatened reputational exposure. The ink had barely dried on that signature when his phone buzzed. Not hers. His. It was a message from one of the trust's legal liaisons. For words, dinner quote already circulated. He didn't reply, just muted the thread. It had begun, and all because she couldn't help but show off. He walked to the window, watched the wind tilt the branches in the backyard. The same yard he'd landscaped himself. The same yard she said needed a designer's touch last month. She never asked who designed the neighborhood. Never bothered to learn the name behind the permits. She just assumed. Assumed he was lucky to have her. Assumed her rise was her own. Assumed she could humiliate him publicly without consequences. And, most tellingly, she assumed Westmore was just a name on a check. Now she'd learn what it meant when a name was a system. A gate. A key. She just didn't know it yet. The champagne hadn't even lost its fizz. She was still mid-story, still basking in the tiny social fireworks she thought she'd lit with that idiotic, traded up line when her boss's phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Then a third time. He glanced at the screen with the vague annoyance of a man used to being on top of every room he enters. His brow didn't furrow yet. Not until the 4th call. Then his entire posture changed. Chin tight, spine straighter. He excused himself with a nod and slipped out onto the patio. No one paid attention at first. They were still coasting on the awkward thrill of her public roast, letting it hang in the air like cigarette smoke. The table was still trying to reset its tone. Someone changed the subject to a vacation home in Aspen. Someone else pretended to care. But a few eyes lingered, not on the conversation, but on the gap her husband had left. One of the newer colleagues leaned over and whispered something to another guest. They both looked toward the patio, where her boss was pacing now. Then he stopped. Stiff. Phone held loosely in one hand, the other tugging absently at his cufflinks. He came back inside. Not rushing. Not calm either. Controlled urgency. The kind that usually precedes damage control. He moved directly to her side and lowered his voice, but not enough. Not enough to keep the conversation private. Not anymore. "You didn't tell me you were married to John Westmore." She blinked once, confused. "Who?" Her boss stared at her like she'd slapped him this time. "John Westmore, the trustee of the Carradine Development Fund." A pause. "You signed a lease under them last month." It took a full 3 seconds for her to process the words, and another 2 for her to hide the panic. She laughed. High-pitched. "Hello. You must be mistaken," she said, waving her hand like she was swatting away a bad smell. He's in consulting. Logistics. Something boring. Except now a woman at the end of the table, one of her friends from the real estate world, the kind who actually reads the business sections, looked up and tilted her head. "Wait. That Westmore. The one who helped restructure the Capital South zoning project." Silence. Her boss didn't respond. He just held up his phone screen toward her. It was a website, corporate filings for the Carradine Development Fund. And there it was, buried halfway down the page. Appointed trustee, silent class A.J. Westmore. The wine glass in her hand tilted slightly. She didn't notice. But the table did. Her boss leaned in. Do you understand how this looks? You joked about trading up in front of a dozen witnesses, including vendors and investors, while standing on a lease that runs through 2032. That's not a punchline. That's a breach. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Not denial. Not explanation. Just the reflexive twitch of someone realizing the room had turned, and she had no idea when it happened. The younger colleague who'd whispered earlier was already typing something into his phone. Another checked her watch. One man at the far end subtly slid his chair back, detaching himself, physically and symbolically. The insulation was peeling off. The social airbag had failed to deploy. She tried again. But it's just a name. John doesn't control anything. I mean, he's never talked about. Her boss cut her off. He didn't need to talk. He just signed a limited use override clause 2 hours ago. He showed her the email. Timestamped. Redacted. But the sender domain was unmistakable. CarradineHoldingsTrust.com. Now she was the one blinking. 2 hours ago. Right after he stood up from the table. Right after her little performance. She looked around, trying to find someone to meet her eyes. But everyone was suddenly busy. Checking their phones. Reading emails. Anything but witnessing her embarrassment. And then came the worst part. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. Someone walked past their table holding a clipboard, the event coordinator. She leaned toward the host and said quietly, just confirming the name correction for the donor list. Westmore stays. Lockwood is removed. A nod. Copy that. She froze. What list? She asked too loudly. But no one answered. Because the list had already been updated. Because she wasn't the story anymore. He was. The party had deflated. What was once glittering now just clinked. Glasses half full, voices low, conversations fragmented into guarded glances and polite disengagements. She sat still, elbows stiff, fingers curled lightly around the stem of her wine glass like it might stabilize her. Her boss had returned to the far end of the patio, deep in discussion with a regional compliance attorney he had summoned with one text. Nobody was laughing anymore. At exactly 9:47 p.m., her phone buzzed once on the table. Just once. No ringtone. No second ping. She didn't look immediately. She was too busy pretending she was still in control, still charming, still unaware that she'd thrown a match into a gas-filled room. But then she did look. And when she did, the color drained from her face with such brutal speed that even the ambient lighting seemed to dim. It was from her father. He knows. Call me before you lose everything. No emojis. No ellipses. No fatherly sweetheart. Just 6 words. And a sense of finality that wrapped around her spine like ice. She stood abruptly, the chair behind her scraping sharply against the tile. Her boss glanced over, but didn't stop speaking. No one followed. No one asked if she was all right. She walked into the guest bathroom and locked the door behind her. Stared at her reflection, tried to straighten her posture, control her breathing, make sense of the sentence she'd just read. He knows. What does he know? She dialed. Voicemail. Tried again. Same result. Then she opened her company dashboard, the administrative portal she never really bothered with beyond approving branding updates and fluff content. She was the visionary, after all. The face. The buzz. She left the back-end stuff to the boring guys. But the audit tab was blinking red. Internal notice. Investigative review initiated. Carradine Property Lease, Zone 4. Filed, 5:33 p.m. Source, third-party fiduciary conflict declaration. Filed over 4 hours ago. Hours before her little toast. Filed, she realized, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone who had the authority, the access, and the legal standing to pull the fire alarm in a building she didn't even know was made of kindling. She scrolled down. Under triggering clause, it listed personal conflict with managing partner of leaseholding entity. Failure to disclose relationship. She stared at that phrase. Personal conflict. That's what they were calling it. Not affair. Not betrayal. Just a calm, bloodless line of liability. And then, impact window, immediate. Her eyes snapped back to her father's text. Call me before you lose everything. Everything. Not something. Not this deal. Not this job. Because he wasn't just her dad. He was also one of the largest, quiet investors in her startup. Through a shell company he once called a birthday gift you'll never see coming. That gift was a 7-figure injection through a holding firm called Jarriston Ridge. She never asked who else was involved in it. Never cared. Thought it was just one of those generational perks rich dads handed their daughters who wanted to build something meaningful. Now she realized that holding firm was part of the angel fund umbrella that required founder disclosures. Romantic, legal, financial, all of it. And she had just stood in front of half her investor network, touched her boss's arm, and publicly implied her marriage was over, without disclosing that her new relationship sat across from a lease governed by her husband's trust. She didn't just cross a line. She broadcasted it. That's why the auditors didn't even need to interview her. The declaration had already been filed. The video clip from the dinner, yes, there was a video, had already been logged as supplemental evidence. A guest had recorded it, posted it in a WhatsApp group. Another forwarded it. Within an hour, it hit the inbox of a compliance officer who knew the name Westmore. She felt dizzy. She opened a group chat of 3 girlfriends, sent a short message. Hey, did you notice anything weird tonight? Read. No response. She called her assistant. Straight to voicemail. She called her father again. Still nothing. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She searched her husband's name on LinkedIn. Not his public profile, the one she'd seen 1,000 times, the one that said consultant/logistics specialist/risk advisor. No. This time, she scrolled down, past the endorsements, past the projects, to the activity section, and saw a single, quiet update from 3 weeks ago. Pleased to continue our work with CDG. Strategy over noise. Legacy over hype. She'd rolled her eyes at the time. Thought it was just another dry post from a man who didn't understand how to market himself. Now she saw the initials again, CDG, Carradine Development Group. And finally, she realized. He didn't move emotionally. He moved legally. And he had started 4 hours before she even opened her mouth. She slammed the front door so hard a framed picture in the hallway rattled on its nail and slid crooked. Her heels clicked down the entryway like accusations. Purse flung. Coat shed. Breath shallow from rage, but also something else now. That shaky tightness in the throat that comes when you're still pretending to be in control and already know you aren't. He was in the study. The old one. Not the sleek new shared office she had designed upstairs with soft gray walls and fake succulents. No, he was sitting in the room she hated. The one with the ugly banker lamp. The one with books older than both of them. The one she once called a mausoleum with Wi-Fi. She stopped in the doorway. He didn't look up right away. Just moved the mouse slightly, paused the video, and waited. You're trying to destroy me? She snapped. It came out louder than she wanted. Not hysterical, but pitched. Sharpened. Like she needed the volume to compete with the panic clawing at her ribs. Still, he didn't flinch. He looked at her like a man who'd already seen the movie and was just rewatching it for the details. You said you traded up, he said calmly. I made sure everyone knew what you traded away. It wasn't venomous. That's what unnerved her most. No yelling. No demands. Just surgical clarity. She stepped inside the study, half waiting for him to get up. Confront her. Plead. Threaten. Something. But he stayed seated, one ankle resting on his knee, perfectly balanced. I didn't mean it like that. You know how parties get. Behind him, the screen lit up again. She recognized the face immediately, her boss. The man she'd stroked the arm of like a prize poodle. The man who was so smug an hour ago, and now his face was pale in a grainy zoom capture. On screen, a compliance officer from their firm's legal team reading a statement aloud. Due to potential conflicts of interest in property negotiations and the public statements made by Ms. Lockwood at a documented social event, we are initiating a private review of all approvals involving Zone 4 leases. She stepped closer. What is this? Why are you even watching? He muted the audio with a click, then turned his chair slightly toward her. Not all the way. Just enough. It's part of the disclosure package, he said. The Carradine Fund submitted it when your boss's name was flagged for review. A pause. Apparently your quote got passed around. Her face flushed hot. People knew I was joking. No, they didn't, he replied. And more importantly, investors didn't. She opened her mouth, but he kept going. They flagged it because your romantic involvement overlaps with a commercial lease that you never disclosed. That's what gets reviewed. That's what triggers audits. Not whether you were technically divorced yet. Not whether your little line was technically a joke. He pulled up another window, an email from the fund administrator. She read the subject line and felt her stomach twist. Formal conflict filing, Lockwood plus Westridge Group / Carradine Lease, Zone 4. She tried to speak. Failed. Cleared her throat. This doesn't make sense, she said, quieter now. This is an overreaction. No one cares about dinner party gossip. No, he agreed. No one cares. Until there's paper. And now there's paper. Silence. She scanned the screen again, hoping to see something she could challenge. A date that was wrong. A name that didn't match. Anything. But it was all clean. Legal. Final. You're not just ruining me, she said suddenly. You're tanking the company. Your name's on half of that infrastructure. So if this goes down. It won't, he interrupted. Carradine's name stays clean. They just pivoted. Restructuring's already in motion. Her throat went dry. Already. He nodded. Your team gets shelved. Temporarily. Your role gets reviewed. Quietly. Your startup gets paused. Legally. He paused again. Permanently. She blinked. You can't just. I didn't do anything, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I just let the rules work. And that was when she felt it. That horrible, soft collapse feeling. The realization that she wasn't fighting a man. She was inside a system he'd built. A system where her tantrum didn't even register as a threat. Where the walls weren't reacting, they were absorbing. Her knees felt soft. She looked down at her hands, still clenched around her phone. One more voicemail from her father sat unplayed. She tried again. I didn't mean. I know, he said. She looked at him sharply. He held her gaze for the first time all night. I know, he repeated. That's why it worked. She sat at the edge of the bed, like someone waiting for anesthesia to kick in. Only it wasn't coming. The world around her was still too sharp, too present. Her purse had been thrown on the floor like a crime scene bag. Her heels lay sideways in the hallway, one strap broken. Her makeup smudged, not from tears, but from disbelief sweating out through every pore. Her phone was on her lap, the screen dimmed now, the voicemails untouched. She couldn't bring herself to listen. Not yet. Downstairs, the printer hummed. It was the sound of inevitability. She walked barefoot toward the noise, each step sticky against the hardwood. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, he was already there, by the old oak credenza, collecting the pages as they slid out of the tray. Calm. Mechanical. She didn't say anything. She just waited. He handed her the stack without looking up. A dozen pages, stapled. With a yellow post-it stuck to the front. Page 7. Paragraph 4. She peeled it off and started reading, trying to keep her eyes from darting. The pages were dated from 3 years ago, one of the first investment rounds they'd filed for her company. She barely remembered the signing day. It had been sunny. Her nails were freshly done. They'd gone to brunch afterward and posted a photo. First seed round secured. Hashtag startup life. She flipped to page 7. There it was. Nestled between boilerplate indemnities and jurisdiction codes. In the event of marital dissolution, corporate acquisition, or formal dissolution of relationship between the beneficiary and the founding sponsor, all intellectual property, trademarks, patents, and creative work products revert to the founding sponsor unless explicitly reassigned in a secondary clause. She blinked. Then read it again. Wait. This isn't enforceable. This is just one of those placeholder clauses. It's enforceable, he said quietly. She looked up. No judge is going to just. It's not about a judge. It's about ownership. She flipped through the rest of the contract, hunting for the reassignment forms, the waivers, the exceptions. Her name wasn't on any of them. Where's the transfer form? She asked, voice thin. There isn't one. She stared at him. You never assigned the IP? No. You knew this would happen? No, he said again. I knew you stopped asking questions after the pitch deck looked pretty. That one landed. Her mouth opened, then shut. The clause wasn't a trap. It was a wall she never bothered to look over. She'd been so focused on branding, partnerships, public-facing buzz. She let him handle the boring paperwork, the skeleton of the company. And now? Now she realized her empire was built with bricks someone else owned. Her eyes scanned the line again. Founding sponsor. That was his name, not hers. Every patent, every line of back-end code written by contractors, every trademark filed during the formation window. They were all assigned to the founder, him, under her own signature. I thought it was just a favor, she muttered. I thought you were just helping me get it off the ground. I was, he said. You asked for help. I gave it. You called me your silent partner. So I stayed silent. She sat down on the arm of the couch, gripping the papers like they might crumble if she breathed wrong. This can't be real. It's real. But I pitched it. I built the brand. The clients came through me. Yes, he said. But the foundation was mine. You just never cared who laid it. It was too quiet. She could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the next room. Could hear a neighbor's sprinkler sputter on through the window. All of it felt surreal. Like the background noise of someone else's nightmare. But, she tried one more time, you can't want this. You're not going to actually use it, right? I mean, this is leverage. Not punishment. He tilted his head. You used our marriage as a marketing stunt. You paraded your boss in front of our friends like he was your upgrade. You humiliated me for the sake of a moment. You broke the contract. I didn't break. You did. Not just the emotional one. The legal one. She stared at him. I didn't know, she whispered. I know, he said. That's why it's binding. It wasn't rage in his voice. Not gloating. Just clean, surgical logic. And that's when it hit her. Not like a punch, but like a drawbridge lifting with her still on the wrong side. She hadn't just lost the public image. She hadn't just lost control of the narrative. She'd lost everything, before the story even began. The silence came in stages. Not all at once like a fall, but in increments, like a house emptying itself one item at a time. First, it was the group chats. She'd messaged something funny or mildly self-congratulatory, like she always had. And instead of the usual flurry of laughing emojis and inside jokes, there was nothing. Not even a reaction bubble. Ghost town. Then came the slow bleed of calendar deletions. Brunches she'd confirmed now had rescheduled tags. A wine tasting she was co-hosting was suddenly postponed indefinitely. A panel discussion in DC she'd been prepping for quietly replaced her headshot with a generic silhouette. She refreshed the page 3 times. The name was gone. No announcement. No explanation. Just gone. She forwarded the event coordinator a polite email. Hey, noticed my name wasn't on the list anymore. Just a tech glitch. And got no response. Not even a read receipt. That's when the pit in her stomach stopped being a knot and started feeling more like a void. But the final confirmation came from a woman named Sasha, one of her oldest friends. The kind of friendship that once meant annual spa trips, joint holiday cards, and middle-of-the-night calls about nothing. They had even started their careers together, interns at the same firm, both clawing their way up. Sasha had a birthday dinner scheduled. Intimate. 12 people. She wasn't invited. She only found out because someone tagged her in a photo, accidentally. Then untagged. But not before she saw the candlelit table, the wine, the curated guest list, and Sasha leaning in, laughing with people who, just a week earlier, had been asking her for introductions. She called. Voicemail. Texted. Delivered. Never read. She stared at the message like it was a locked door with no handle. 2 days later, her work calendar updated on its own. Her name was removed from 2 projects she'd initiated. Projects she'd pitched. Pitched hard. The ones she called her babies. No explanation, just gone. The admin team didn't even message her. The files were reassigned. Access permissions quietly revoked. She asked her assistant about it. The assistant stammered through some non-answer about rotating responsibilities. But her voice cracked at the word rotate. Like she didn't believe it herself. Still, she kept up appearances. She posted a throwback photo of a pitch meeting, added a caption about new chapters and exciting shifts, even tried tagging the company's page. The tag didn't stick. It had been blocked. She opened Slack to look for context. The channel for her flagship project? Archived. The private group for her leadership circle? Dissolved. Even the emoji shortcut that used to trigger her name, Butterfly, had been deleted. And then the memo. No subject. Just an internal note slipped into her inbox late at night. Pending internal review, Lockwood. No details. No deadline. No signature. Just a placeholder that said everything it needed to. She stared at it for a full 10 minutes. Not because she didn't understand, but because it confirmed what she already suspected. She had become radioactive. Not for what she did exactly, but for who she did it to. Because it wasn't about the affair. Not really. In their world, affairs were whispered about like new handbag drops. Scandalous, but inevitable. What wasn't inevitable was humiliation. What wasn't tolerated was public failure to manage discretion. And she had failed, loudly. They weren't punishing her for cheating. They were punishing her for being sloppy. For dragging her husband, quiet, well-connected, understated him, into a drama he didn't start, but ended spectacularly. And the unspoken code among them all? You don't pick a public fight with the man who controls the floor under your heels. Now she sat in her overpriced chair at her half-empty desk, looking at the inbox that used to validate her worth, her hustle, her glow-up. It was empty, except for one new message. From the event team that managed the Women in Tech keynote. Subject line, final program update. No greeting. No explanation. Just a new list. Her name wasn't on it. The woman who replaced her? The wife of her former lead investor. A woman she once joked should stay out of the boardroom and stick to charity. Now she was the one doing interviews. Now she was the keynote. And she wasn't just out of the spotlight. She was off the guest list entirely. His study smelled like old leather and dusted regret. The kind of room where time seemed preserved in amber, where nothing ever changed except who sat in the chair across from his. And tonight, that person was her. Wrinkled blouse, faded makeup, dignity slipping off her shoulders in pieces. He didn't greet her, didn't offer a hug, just poured 2 glasses of whiskey, one neat, one untouched, and sat behind the mahogany desk like a judge waiting for the closing arguments to finish themselves. She stood, arms folded, chin up, trying, desperately, to recover some posture. "Why would you send that message?" she asked, her voice already betraying the tremble beneath. He didn't flinch, just looked at her for a long, heavy moment before swirling his drink once. Then, evenly, "You embarrassed a man who did everything for you. At my table, in front of our friends." She blinked, stunned. It was a joke, Dad. You're seriously going to take his side because of some stupid comment at dinner." He raised his eyebrows, slow, deliberate. The same expression he used when executives tried to bluff in negotiation meetings. The one that said, "Careful now. You're already off the cliff. Don't light a cigar." "I thought," she started. He set his glass down harder than necessary. Not loud, but final. "You didn't think," he said sharply. "That's the problem." She opened her mouth to object, but nothing came out. Her father leaned back in his chair. "You humiliated a man who never asked for attention, never asked for recognition, just kept showing up, writing checks, fixing what you broke, letting you take the credit. You mocked him, publicly, and not just to strangers, to the very people who helped build your image." He slid open the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a folder. Manila. Slim. She recognized the logo in the corner, Jarriston Ridge Holdings. Her stomach dropped. "You've always loved telling people you bootstrapped your company, that you got it done with grit and hustle." He opened the folder. "But you never mentioned who provided the land beneath your boots." She stared at him, silent. He pulled out one sheet. Just one. Set it down in front of her. "Effective this morning," he said. "Your shares, Class B, have been reassigned. Clause 12C allowed it upon reputational breach by a primary founder or affiliate." She reached forward slowly, picked up the page like it might sting. And there it was. Her name, crossed out. And under new assignee, Westmore J. Her throat tightened. "You gave him my shares?" "I didn't give him anything," he said. "He's had legal standing from the beginning. You just forgot where the money came from. Forgot who built the fund, who structured the holding, who trusted him to stay silent, because he always did." Her hands trembled as she set the page back down. "I'm your daughter." "I know." She paused, waiting for the but. It didn't come. "I made a mistake." He nodded. "A big one. I can fix it." "No," he said softly. "You can't." He reached into the drawer again, pulled out a small velvet box, opened it. Inside was the signet ring he used to wear when she was a little girl. The one she'd always admired but wasn't allowed to touch. The one with the family crest etched into gold. He set it beside the whiskey glass. "This used to mean something," he said, almost to himself. "Legacy, discretion, loyalty." She looked at it, then back at him. What do I do now?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked past her, toward the bookshelf behind her head. "You embarrassed the one person who would have died before using your name against you. You burned the only bridge that was built for you, not because of you. So now," he finally looked her in the eyes, "you learn what it feels like to be on your own. For real this time." She stood there frozen, every part of her screaming for a way to rewind. He raised his glass, took a slow sip, then said, not unkindly, "Leave the keys on the table." She blinked. "What?" "To the house. To the range. They're in the fund's name. Always were." Her breath caught in her throat. Her father didn't even blink. She set them down one at a time, and left without another word. He didn't watch her go. He didn't need to, because some goodbyes are too final to require the door to close. It landed in her inbox at 6:12 a.m. She was sitting in her condo kitchen, alone in an oversized hoodie, staring into the metallic swirl of her untouched coffee when the notification slid across the screen. A message from her junior assistant, Jenna, the one fresh out of grad school with the permanent look of someone worried about being fired for blinking wrong. The subject line was like a slap. Forward, internal, recommended suspension, conflict risk. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Some compliance alert meant for legal. Maybe a thread she'd been CC'd on by accident. But the moment she clicked it open and saw her name in bold, line 1, paragraph 1, something inside her chest collapsed inward. As discussed, we are recommending an indefinite suspension from all leadership functions for Ms. Lockwood due to reputational liability stemming from ongoing conflict of interest concerns. This is not a termination. This is a protective measure. She is to be removed from the public pipeline until further notice. Her ears rang. No formal statement. No face-to-face. No call. Just shelved. Benched. Not worth the risk. There was a tiny note at the bottom of the forwarded chain. Jenna's, clearly accidental. And then I'll loop in legal once she's off the thread. But she wasn't off the thread. She was never supposed to see it. And somehow, that made it worse. Not just the content, but the tone. It was antiseptic. Administrative. Like she was a malfunctioning spreadsheet column to be hidden, not a human being with a decade of sweat equity in the brand. Her fingers trembled as she hit forward. Typed one line. Please, can we talk? She didn't use a name. She didn't have to. She hit send. To the only person who hadn't said a single word to her in over a week. The one who used to pick up her calls halfway through the first ring. The one who'd made her coffee every Monday for 8 years and never asked why she cried in the shower after a pitch deck failed. Her husband. Husband. The word still felt like hers. The message was marked delivered. It was never marked read. She waited. She waited while the sun rose, while the birds screamed their oblivious songs outside the glass balcony, while the world moved on like she hadn't detonated her own life with one smug comment and an arm touch. At 6:48 a.m., she checked the message again. Still unread. At 7:09, she resent it. Added 2 more words. Please. I'm sorry. Still nothing. By 8 o'clock, she was calling herself stupid. By 8:30, she was halfway through her call log, scrolling through names that used to be her circle and now just looked like people who'd already decided she was a liability. At 8:41, she threw her phone across the room. It bounced off the plush chair and landed on the rug, soft, anticlimactic. No dramatic shatter. No metaphorical mirror breaking. Just another expensive thing no longer responding to her. She got up. Paste. Checked her email again. No response from anyone. Not from legal. Not from PR. Not from Jenna. And definitely not from him. She sat back down and stared at her laptop screen. Eventually, she clicked on the file again. Reread the memo. Tried to dissect the language for loopholes. There were none. It was clinical. Total. A full freeze-out disguised as a soft pause. She'd once told an intern that the scariest punishment in corporate America wasn't being fired. It was being ignored. Being quietly deactivated. Made invisible. Now she understood what she meant. At 10:12 a.m., she got a follow-up. From HR. A line of bland kindness. Let us know where we can send your belongings. She hadn't even cleared her desk yet. She sat there for another hour, watching the cursor blink in an empty reply box. Eventually, she typed a single period. Then deleted it. She didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. Because the one person she still wanted to talk to, needed to talk to, was already gone. Not in fury. Not in spectacle. Just gone. And this time, she was the ghost. It was raining that morning. The kind of slow, deliberate drizzle that made everything seem quieter than it should be. Her apartment was bare now. Half the furniture sold, the rest left to echo against the walls. The once pristine marble counter was littered with unopened mail, and the air smelled faintly of cold coffee and something metallic. Loneliness, maybe. She sat on the couch, laptop balanced on her knees, scrolling through news updates she had no part in anymore. There it was, right at the top of her feed, under business briefs. Carradine Development Fund announces strategic restructuring and leadership transition. Her pulse spiked as she clicked. The article was brief. Surgical. No drama. No commentary. Just facts. As part of the ongoing restructuring, Carradine Development Fund has withdrawn from all long-term property leases in favor of a new governance model. Assets previously held under Carradine will be transferred to a new trust entity effective immediately. She scrolled. Past the legal jargon. Past the investor statements. Past the recycled PR lines about evolving markets and renewed strategy. And then she saw it. At the bottom of the press release, tucked neatly in the corporate footer. Senior partner, J. Westmore. Her breath caught. Not John. Not her husband. Not the man she'd mocked at dinner. Just the name. Simple. Final. He'd taken it back. Everything. The trust. The leases. The company name. The silence. And now his name wasn't spoken in pity or confusion. It was respected. Even feared. She stared at the screen, her reflection faint in the glow. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built her image on perception, on being seen. Now, even her shadow looked like a stranger. The rain tapped softly against the glass, a steady reminder that the world kept moving. That he kept moving. Her inbox pinged. One new message. From an automated legal address. Subject: Intellectual Property Transfer Confirmation, final notice. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a scanned document. Her signature from 3 years ago, faint but clear. The clause she ignored. The same one that had reappeared like a ghost every time she thought she'd found a way out. Her contractual terms established under founding sponsor agreement. All intellectual property rights revert to J. Westmore effective upon dissolution. No loopholes. No appeals. Attached was a second PDF titled Acknowledgement of Final Assignment. She opened it. Her name. His signature. And at the very bottom, in plain black font, "Thank you for the trade." That was it. No bitterness. No triumph. Just quiet punctuation on a life dismantled with precision. She sat back, staring at that single sentence until the words lost meaning. Thank you for the trade. Trade. That's what it was, wasn't it? One moment of arrogance for an entire life's foundation. One public slap disguised as a joke for a private reckoning that would never stop echoing. Her phone vibrated once more. A news alert this time. A photo of a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The new trust's headquarters. He stood at the center, flanked by investors and community figures. He wasn't smiling, exactly, but there was something in his posture. Peace. Control. No caption mentioned her. No article referenced her name. She'd been erased, not out of malice, but with the same quiet care he'd shown every step of the way. She closed the laptop. The rain outside intensified, and for a moment, she thought she heard the faint hum of a familiar voice in her head. His, calm and measured, from that night in the study. You said you traded up. I made sure everyone knew what you traded away. She exhaled. The screen went dark, reflecting her face one last time. Blurred, colorless, small. And then she whispered into the empty room, voice barely audible beneath the rain. Thank you for the trade.